So for the past couple of days we've been looking at Ellis Island and its impact on immigration. And I thought you might want to see what Ellis Island looks like on Google Earth, so we're going to zoom in there. And as we're zooming in, is Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty in New York, New Jersey? New York, New Jersey, New York, New Jersey. Wow, this gets rather interesting because when we look at Ellis Island, and you can see where the ferries went in, you can see one here. You can also see all the pictures that have been taken. And then we zoom out to include the Statue of Liberty, which is over here on Liberty Island. It would look from this border here, which is between New York and New Jersey, that in fact the Statue of Liberty and Liberty Island and Ellis Island are in New Jersey. But there's been a lot of court cases on that. Here's the dividing line again. And the Statue of Liberty is actually on national park land, which means technically it belongs to the federal government, but most people assume that it is actually part of the state of New York because they use that for a lot of their promotions and their pictures and everything. And Ellis Island is also a federal park, but technically they actually belong to New York, even though the dividing line makes it look like it doesn't. But we're kind of going to move away from Ellis Island now. In fact, we're going to move all the way across the country to find out about another immigration processing place called Angel Island. And it is all the way across the country, but we'll fly by map and get there in about 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1, okay, 4 seconds, whatever. Here's Angel Island in San Francisco. Certainly has a different appearance than does Ellis Island rather, and it certainly served a different function in time. I'm going to zoom out just so you can see where it is. It's near Alcatraz, if you've been familiar with Alcatraz, or maybe you haven't been there. Oh, just went across the screen there. And in San Francisco Bay. As you can imagine, this immigration processing center would not serve as many Europeans. Instead, it would serve people from another continent. I'm going to give you a couple seconds to think about what continent that would be, and you're going to answer this on your Google form, so make sure you're paying attention. What continent would be sending its people to Angel Island? Good. You'll answer that in a couple of seconds. And the story of Angel Island is certainly not the exact same as Ellis Island. It served different people, and it also had dramatically different results. As we look at these two different ports of immigration entry, certainly you have Ellis Island over here in the New York, New Jersey area, and Angel Island here in the San Francisco area. When you look more closely at them, they're both islands. Yes, that's great. They're in different parts of the country. They serve different people. But I'll tell you this, at Ellis Island, as I said in class, overall 98% of the people who made it to Ellis Island got in. In Angel Island, the opposite is true. Only about 2% of the people who made it to Angel Island actually got in. And a lot of it has to do with racism and anger and racism towards the Chinese. We're going to listen to a video clip about an expert who knows a lot about something that's called the Chinese Exclusion Act.
The Chinese Exclusion Act really starts with labor. White labor, and it starts with white labor in California. Chinese immigrants had started to come in relatively small numbers in response to the discovery of gold in California after 1849, and then started to come in growing numbers, still not huge numbers, through the 1850s. But in the 1860s, the U.S., as a matter of policy, really goes out of its way to make a treaty with China that will allow significant numbers of Chinese immigrants to come over to build the railroad, the Transcontinental Railroad. Now, it's when the railroad is completed that Chinese labor starts to be perceived to be a problem for white laborers, because the Chinese laborers come back down out of the Sierras and start to settle in cities like San Francisco and start to move into other trades. They start to move into things like shoemaking and cigar making. And the hue and cry really begins on the infamous Sandlot in California, in San Francisco, and in particular a leader who happens to be an Irish immigrant himself, Dennis Kearney, raising the alarm that Chinese laborers are going to displace. They're either going to completely displace white laborers and take jobs that are rightly the jobs of white workers, or that their peculiar habits are such that they're going to bid down. I mean, the stereotype was the Chinese immigrant really didn't need anything. The Chinese worker could subsist on a bowl of rice a day. And so what?
Okay, so this guy uses a lot of big words. He also has a cool earring over here, and he looks like he's about to kiss us, so we're going to stop him for a minute. What he's saying, translating that, is the Chinese came over for the gold rush, then a lot more came over to work on the railroad, but when the railroad was done, they went back to settle in the San Francisco area and started doing non-railroad jobs, laundry, businesses, banks, whatever, in San Francisco, and they became competition for the other workers. And when unemployment problems happened, the Chinese would often get the jobs that were remaining because they were willing to work for less. They didn't seem to need as much money to survive. They were used to living at a lower cost of living, and so they were getting the jobs, and it was angering some of the white population. And what the white population decided to do was ask Congress to make a law. And we're going to learn about that law called the Chinese Exclusion Act. One of the areas in particular that the Americans, or a lot of white Americans, did not like about the Chinese were famous for doing laundry for a cheap price. You can see this kind of racist cartoon in front of you here that says the Chinese must go. They're being chased out of where? Say it out loud. Go ahead. Good job. And they were being chased back to something that's kind of off your screen here, but it should say China. And the Chinese Exclusion Act, which is pictured here, because back in the old days they used to write things down in this crazy thing called cursive, which we have trouble reading now. And in 1882, it's cut off here, but Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act. This is the first law, and maybe the only law in the history of the United States, that excluded only one group of people from coming in. It didn't say all Asians, Japanese and Koreans could come in. It didn't say the Irish couldn't come in. It didn't say that the Italians, the Russians, whoever, it didn't say any of them couldn't come in. It said the Chinese couldn't come in, or Chinese laborers couldn't come in. The only Chinese that would be allowed to come into the United States would be those that were doctors, lawyers, teachers, professional type. Any Chinese laborers would be sent back if they tried to get in. And that's what happened. A lot of Chinese thought that they could get through, and they came to Angel Island hoping they could get through, only to be sent back. It was very difficult to prove that you were a doctor, a lawyer, or teacher type, and often they get sent back to China. This act banned Chinese immigration for 10 years. So do the math on this, people. It was created in 1882. What's 10 years from 1882? Good, 1892, but guess what? Congress renewed it for another 10 years. And then another 10 years, and then another 10 years, and another 10 years, until, if my math is correct, you can check me on this, it expires in 1942. And the only reason that it really expired and we stopped being kind of racist towards the Chinese is because we were fighting another Asian group called the Japanese in something called World War II. And the Chinese were our allies, and we needed them on our side, so we wanted to be nice again, and we said the Chinese could come to America. Lovely situation. But for our history lesson today, the Chinese are the only group through the Chinese Exclusion Act that are banned from coming into the United States, and as it says here, the only one barred out or banned out. We'll be looking at some cartoons of this on Tuesday in class, and some poetry as well, and by doing this lesson, you will have the background knowledge that you need to succeed. Bye-bye.